Hello, my name is George Miers. I am a California architect, and my background includes the design of special use buildings for unique and operationally driven building types, of which animal care facilities is one. While the focus of this lecture will be on specific design and construction issues related to animal care facilities, my experience over the past 30 years of working on these buildings leads me to begin with a warning. Namely, beware of those who place too much expectations on a building solving what are really operational problems, particularly regarding an animal shelter. Many people see the construction of a new or renovated shelter facility as a panacea for all shelter-related problems, as though somehow the facility will magically keep animals healthy, content, and ultimately lead to their adoption. There are many understandable reasons for this viewpoint, and hopefully this slide is worth 1,000 words. And a new, well-designed facility certainly should help achieve these desirable goals. However, it is ultimately the organization's programs and staff that constitute the real shelter, and ultimately are the key to the shelter's success. So, as we move through this lecture, I urge you to keep this warning in mind. I prefer to see the shelter building as a big tool that needs to be constructed in a manner that the user can actually operate. I also like to use the term appropriate, because what works well for one user may not work for another. The design challenge is making the appropriate choices of what best assists the client with their intended goals and operations. Notwithstanding the building's limitations to actually care for animals, this big tool we call a shelter can certainly assist in many ways. And conversely, older shelters not only hinder staff from performing their intended tasks, but they also detract from an animal's well-being and fail to assist them in recovering from the trauma they experience upon entering a shelter facility, a subject which we will get into later in the discussion about stress and shelters. So a well-designed building can assist in many ways. They can create supportive animal habitats, they simplify and improve cleaning operations, they enhance medical efficiency in operations, they can help direct visitors and staff movement through the facility, and one of the most important things I think they do is they establish an ambience of well-being throughout the facility. And there's obviously many more benefits of a well-designed facility. But again, and in summary, humans do the heavy lifting and provide the care. So where do we start when designing a building or just selecting appropriate materials? I start with a program and then a plan that meets the user's operational needs and preferred activity flow. What you're looking at here is a floor plan of the Hagenberger low-cost spay-neuter clinic, which is in Oakland, California. And the diagram you're seeing and the arrows are showing the incoming animals and their flow through the facility. Initially, how the owners bring them in, and then how staff take them, examine them, place them in holding facilities, and eventually to the prep area, surgery, back to the holding facility, and eventually back to the owners. Once the program and operational flow are established, the next step is to put the pieces together into an overall design. This particular floor plan is the City of San Jose Animal Control Facility, and as you can see, there's a wide array of different uses, from adoption areas, medical areas, classroom, administrative functions, and a wide variety of animal holding areas, from isolation, holding, adoption, etc. And all of these are organized to meet the program, to meet that operational flow, but also around a basic idea, which in this case is the central courtyard. And this is what architects will call the big idea. Once the big idea is established, it's time to develop appropriate protocols. Protocols are generally the purview of staff, although they're often established as a collaboration between architects and staff. It's those protocols that dictate the corresponding design solutions. For example, how are animals to be held? Are they held in cages, kennels, or rooms? The answer to that question goes a long way to telling us the type of materials, floors, ceilings, and walls that'll be used, and the assemblies for putting all of those materials together. How are these habitats cleaned? It's common today to use power washdown. Those washdowns are often at as high as 1,200 pounds per square inch. Conversely, conventional garden hoses are only at about 60 psi. It's about 20 times the amount of force exerted on the material. So whereas both need to be waterproof, anything that's holding up to 1,200 psi has to be doubly strong. So a good example is that caulking that's often used at water conditions. Caulking can hold up at 60 psi pressure, but a 1,200 psi garden hose is going to blow the caulking right out of whatever crevice it happens to be in. So it's something you have to be very careful about. It also is not uncommon to mop certain rooms. Cat rooms, cages might be a good example. The key is selecting the appropriate material for the job. If you're starting off with concrete floors, concrete block walls, which you often find in kennels, find in older animal shelters, you've got to be very careful about porosity. Concrete is strong, but it's very, very porous. And what happens is that over time, bacteria, detergents, other things actually seep into the concrete. The odor that we often associate with older shelters, and most people identify with the animals that are in the shelter, is actually bacteria that's formed within the crevices of the concrete. This is why it's a good practice, and you'll see this in newer shelters, to coat the various materials, coating concrete or concrete block walls with epoxy rosin coating. We do this on the floors and the walls. Sometimes if you're just mopping, you might use sheet vinyl, but you'll use sheet vinyl with coved corners to make it easier to mop. Dog rooms and kennels need some form of washdown. Here you're looking at two room environments at the new Peninsula Humane Society in the San Francisco Bay Area. These rooms were designed specifically to have a friendlier look, to approximate a home environment. The couches, by the way, are concrete couches made to look like a softer couch. But these rooms have to go through the same twice daily wash down, and we are using, in this case, 1,200 psi Spraymaster's technology washdown equipment. What you're looking at in the blue is a wall epoxy rosin coating, and in the darker gray floor, a floor epoxy. They're similar materials, although the floor material is a heavier duty one than the wall. Corners get stainless steel corner guards. There's a lot of waterproofing around doors and windows. There's a lot of effort that goes into making the lower part of this room wash down. Above the chair rail, we do have a painted condition, but again, we're using epoxy paint. The backside of these rooms all enter onto what I call a socialization room. Animals are fed in these rooms, they're trained in these rooms. Oftentimes these rooms serve as a get acquainted room, but they have to go through the same type of wash down condition. Again, you see the floor epoxy, you see the drain in the middle of the room, the wall epoxy going up to about 4 feet. And you'll also notice that any penetration in the wall, light switches, signage, etc., all occur, even low-level exhaust, which is directly in front of you to help reduce odor. They are all above the epoxy rosin coating, because what we try not to do is to penetrate the waterproof membrane. So penetrations all occur above that point. And here you have a demonstration of a 1200 psi Power wash. This is the Spraymasters technology system that I mentioned previously. Spraymasters is a company out of Arkansas. They are one of the few companies in North America that make power wash down equipment specifically for shelters, and there's a lot of different devices that they have that really make wash down in an animal control environment where you've got to sometimes carefully calibrate the chemicals that you're using much easier. Again, you're seeing the kind of epoxy rosin floor with the 6-inch cove coming up. So again, there's no hard corners. Everything is coved. You have the epoxy coated walls, the chair rail, and then above that is where the penetrations are. Now you'll note that this guy is not paying any attention to what he's doing. He's looking away. And although this is a demonstration and maybe not a big deal here, that is not uncommon in the real world, where oftentimes staff are not pointing the hose down where it's intended to go. So even though we tend to focus on the materials up to a certain height, these rooms really need to be treated in a way that any additional spray that gets up above that chair rail, somebody who's really not paying attention and sprays the ceiling, and I can tell you it's done all the time, that all the materials can withstand that 1200 psi spray. This is not a dog room, it's a kennel, but dogs are held in here, and this particular room also requires wash down at least twice a day. This is a somewhat older facility we did at the San Diego campus for animal care, completed about 10 years ago. You'll see that mounted on the wall is a pull-down power wash. It's not the Spraymasters technology. It's not up at 1200 psi, but it's much stronger than a garden hose. The floor of this facility is the same epoxy rosin coating that you saw in the room environments. However, the walls are actually a concrete block. I'm not sure if you can see that from where you're sitting. But in this case, and this is something we don't do anymore, but we did seal the concrete with an epoxy paint. It's much less expensive than the epoxy rosin coating, but what we found over the years is that although the epoxy paint seals well, dogs scratch it. And wherever a dog can get up against it, you get a lot of scratching, particularly if it's inside the kennel. And it's a constant maintenance concern. So for any of you who are thinking of doing that, I think you got to think about where you're coating something and what the long-term maintenance is going to be. So this is concrete block in a kennel situation under construction. And again, you can see, comparing this to the previous slide, we go through and end up coating all of these surfaces. This is one of the reasons why, at least here on the West Coast, we've gotten away from concrete block, because we find that we can actually build stud walls with underlayment that is much more impervious to water that the epoxy rosin coating goes on. Concrete block is very expensive, and if you have to go through and coat it continuously in order to make it waterproof and to prevent water from penetrating it and bacteria, it seemed to us that it made much more sense to go to a different type of wall material. Here is another way of possibly handling concrete block, if that is a direction that one wanted to go in, because it is durable. But this here is a glazed concrete block. Again, you see the epoxy rosin coating on the floor. This is not a facility we did, because we would never put a trench drain like that for cleaning the kennels. We always put our drains inside the kennels. But the wall material is easily washable. This does not harbor bacteria. You do need to use an antimicrobial caulk in between those concrete block, but it's very, very durable. Unfortunately, this type of concrete block with the glazed finish on it is probably 7 or 8 times the cost of traditional concrete block. This is the new Palm Springs Animal Shelter. It was completed about 2 years ago. It's primarily an indoor-outdoor facility, although it does have some room environments like the Peninsula Humane Society that we looked at earlier. Even though this is all outdoor, the portion that you're seeing, we still have epoxy rosin floors. In this case, we did use concrete block on the outside, and primarily because of cost reasons, we did not coat the epoxy rosin onto the concrete block. However, in an outdoor setting with the ultraviolet light from either direct or even indirect sun, bacteria is not as much of an issue here, and certainly odor is not an issue. On the interior portion of these runs, all of those same kennels are completely coated. All the concrete block is completely coated with wall ERC. What probably is difficult for you to kind of see on this slide is on top of the kennels themselves, just because of the heat, we have a steel structure with an inlaid fabric that blocks the sun, and then under that are misters that provide cooling during a large part of the summer months for the animals. Power washdown equipment is fairly sophisticated. On the very upper left, you're looking at the Spraymaster's Technology pumps. You'll see 3 stacked pumps on one end and 2 on the other. It's not unusual for a larger facility to have 2 or 3 rooms with maybe 5 to 8 of these pumps in them. Each pump serves maybe 3 to 5 kennels or rooms. What's missing in this picture is that the pumps actually take chemicals that are in 55-gallon drums. The drums are not shown. And then they pipe them through 1-inch stainless steel tubing to the individual rooms. Inside those rooms are boxes, which you see in the upper right. The hoses attach with a quick coupler connection, which you can kind of see on the right of that upper right photo. And then there's a series of dials just to the left of that that allow you to either apply a full chemical rinse or a half chemical rinse, or even a full clean water rinse. You can set these up any way you want. The photo on the lower right is an Anivac system, which is actually a Canadian company. And this system was designed specifically to use hydrogen peroxide several years ago, which is now growing in use all over North America. It's highly recommended by a number of the top veterinary schools, such as UC Davis, who I work with a lot. Hydrogen peroxide is environmentally safer, and all the tests that have been done that I have read about seem to be as effective, if not more effective, than most of the other chemicals that are used. One of the issues with the Spraymaster's technology system is that hydrogen peroxide will corrode stainless steel. So in order to use hydrogen peroxide with the Spraymaster's technology system, which is the one on the left, you actually have to take the chemicals and apply them on the hose side, which kind of is somewhat counterintuitive to the way that system is set up. We have many systems, Edmonton Humane Society, Peninsula Humane Society, that do use the Spraymaster's technology and do use hydrogen peroxide, so it does work. But if you're looking into these products, you should look very carefully at them relative to the type of chemicals that you're going to be using. A key issue with any plumbing system, and it also relates to the type of materials you're going to use and how they're detailed in a room, is the type of drain that you're going to use. For many, many years, trench drains, which are shown on the left-hand slide, kind of hard to read. There's a trench drain that is there under a stainless steel plate that covers that trench drain, and you're actually looking straight ahead at a guillotine door. and I'll show you another slide of that in just a second. But trench drains were used where you would wash the kennel down. You can see there's a small slot under the drain cover that would, prevent feces from going in. It's really just for water. But these systems require you to scoop feces and bag it. In the last 5 years, there's been a growing interest in shelters in getting away from the trench drain and going to individual drains. Here you see an individual drain that has a lid that can actually be lifted up, and there's a whole keying system on these that I won't get into right now, but that allows staff to either lock it down so the dog doesn't play with it, but when you go to clean, you actually lift the lid, you deposit the feces right there, close the lid, then you wash down the room. Here is the trench drain now with the trench cover removed, and the guillotine door is up, so you're looking from one side of the kennel to the other. You can see here how the epoxy rosin coating terminates at the trench drain, but we actually go in and coat the inside of the trench drain itself with another epoxy coating to just make it easier for fecal matter to make its way to the drain. One of the things that you'll note on the very right-hand end of the trench drain, looks like a pipe, is actually a water pipe that washes the fecal matter that will be in that trench drain towards a drain, which is to the left. The existence of that drain, which is domestic water into that drain, creates a complicated plumbing situation where we have to provide air gaps to make sure that there never is any cross-contamination between the domestic water supply and the fecal matter that is within the trench drain. And on this wall, which is actually the Peninsula Humane Society socialization room, again everything above that chair rail, is all related to the plumbing system. The two boxes in the middle are the Spraymaster's Technology quick coupler connections. The handles that you see closer to the chair rail is actually a manual water system that allows you to clean out the drains by shooting water through, similar to what you saw in the trench drain. The two black knobs are timers so that somebody doesn't forget to leave the water on, so there's actually a timing device. And the two boxes, larger boxes, and those two valves up at the top is that cross-contamination air gap system that I mentioned. So it's a very, very sophisticated system in modern day shelter systems to really make sure that the wash down and all the other components of a cleaning system work well. So as we develop these great high pressure, low pressure water cleaning systems, the building has to be able to withstand that. And so what you're seeing here is a threshold under a door, and you just can't put a regular threshold down. You've got to put a bed of caulk, not a bead of caulk, and this guy is going over and over this to make sure that the eventual threshold sits in a bed of caulk, because any water that goes from the animal side, which is where the workman that's applying the caulk is located, to the outdoor portion, which in this case is a public walkway, that threshold is watertight. There also is under the door what we call a drop bottom, that is a neoprene gasket that when the door closes, and I don't know if you can see this, but at the very bottom of that door there's a button. When the door closes and that button engages the jamb, it drops a neoprene gasket down that then engages the threshold. So just the assembly at the bottom of the door is something that you've got to pay a lot of attention to if you don't want water infiltration to move from the intended washdown areas to the unintended areas that are often, where the public are located. And after all that work, I end up going through many of these facilities in my walkthrough, and this is usually the first thing I do, and I find out that these guys didn't really do what they were supposed to do, because if you can stick a card underneath there, you have not caulked that area, even though the other areas around it look like they've been caulked. So any of you ever have a facility where you're trying to make sure this occurs, you've got to, after all the instructions, make sure that they actually did what they were supposed to do. And this is another indication that anywhere in these washdown areas where there's a crevice where water can get in, any area like this, not only will water get in, but bacteria will build up, and you got to make sure that it is completely watertight. Now, cats are generally easier to take care of in their rooms because they can be mopped. There are some situations in shelters where staff believe the area should be washed down, and when that occurs, we accommodate that, and we usually use epoxy rosin coating. But in this particular instance, what you're looking at here is, at the Edmonton Humane Society, is a sheet vinyl floor. It's coved up against 6 inches, and there's a special coating on the wall, and these rooms do get mopped down every day, but they don't get treated with any type of washdown. Similar type of community cat room, Sacramento Animal Care Facility, another different type of kind of layout, the Peninsula Humane Society. All of these rooms are intended to be mopped. If you're careful with the type of materials on the wall and you do have an outbreak of upper respiratory disease, you can go in there and completely clean it with whatever cleaner you have, but usually that's not an everyday, twice-a-day event. If you are intending, again, to wash these areas down, you should not be using sheet vinyl, and you should go back to something like the epoxy rosin coating on the walls. This is a close-up of, again, the care we take with the sheet vinyl. We always cove it. It's got to be very carefully caulked up against door frames, windows, because water does get in there. And you can see, this is before the sheet vinyl is applied, how the cove is set up, and, all of the adhesive glues that are used to make sure you get a good adhesion. So this is the Edmonton Humane Society again, and this is the public hallway with cat rooms, cat individual rooms and community rooms on either side that are treated with sheet vinyl, but the central hallway here is actually a stained concrete. This area looks great during the day. A lot of care and attention has been given to it to make sure that even mopping from inside the room doesn't enter out here. But as nice as this room looks when the public comes into it, it ends up looking like this when staff have to clean it. So in addition to, trying to take care of all of the cleaning conditions and the nooks and crannies and bacteria buildup, good planning's got to take into account the storage of all of this equipment during the day. In this particular instance, each one of these gallery areas has their own janitorial area where all of these supplies are kept. In addition to thinking out the finishes in a room, and again, this is back at the Edmonton Humane Society in one of those cat rooms, we often work with staff to develop things like kitty litter boxes. This particular one you're looking at is a stainless steel box. The type of cleaning system they have for cages allows us to take these boxes, and empty them and actually clean and sterilize them in the washing equipment that's located at the facility. This is again back at the Edmonton Humane Society in one of the public viewing areas looking into various cat rooms. And although this is not a wash-down area, it's a public area, I think one of the issues in most shelters today is just the cleaning of the overall facility, because there's a lot of walkways. Although mostly humans go through here, you will have animals and dogs once in a while going through. So cleaning is a constant issue. So in this particular facility, one of the things they did is they actually purchased their own Zamboni, and they, once a day, at the end of the day, they clean all of those floors with the Zamboni, which is kept in their storage area. So, cleaning of the facility in general is just a major issue in any animal care facility, animal and human areas alike. This is a cage facility now, or a cage room, but we're back at the Peninsula Humane Society where they have wildlife. And although the animals are kept in cages, just the nature of these animals and a lot of the different type of kind of debris and ends up on the floor, and oftentimes groups come in here and play with the animals on the floor. Oftentimes we're directed by staff to put down an epoxy rosin coating on the floor. So, cage rooms often will have epoxy rosin coating, and this goes back to the issue of just appropriate materials for the appropriate protocol. And you really have to kind of sit down and ask yourself, what are you trying to do in the room? What's the issues in the room? Are you going to have different kind of uses in the room? And then apply the materials appropriately for those intended uses. This is something we always build into the facilities, which is a cage washing area. Obviously you can clean the cages in an individual room, but sometimes it makes sense to pull a cage out or to pull something else out of that room and to actually wash it down. So in many of our facilities, we will have, in different parts of the facility, alcoves that are cage washing alcoves like this with built-in detergents, that you can use for a wide variety of uses. Durable materials and appropriate appliances. We've been focusing on durable materials, but there's many other components of a shelter, an animal care facility, that require appropriate appliances and other components such as stainless steel counters, stainless steel corner guards, which you've seen in a number of the rooms, sanitizers as opposed to dishwashers. We, with almost no exception, will use sanitizers for the cleaning of bowls, both for the general population of a shelter as well as the isolation areas. In fact, we will have special ISO food preps with their own sanitizers. The difference being that the sanitizers sterilize. The water gets up over 160 degrees so that you can make sure that you're avoiding any type of cross-contamination with your bowls. The use of commercial washer and dryers. And then, of course, as we've been talking, appropriate floors, walls, and ceilings. So here we have a stainless steel kitchen at the Edmonton Humane Society. On the left-hand side, stainless steel cabinetry and drawers and shelving. On the right-hand side, you can see the stainless steel bowls as they have just come out of the stainless steel sanitizer, which in this particular instance is a conveyor belt type of sanitizer, which the Canadians seem to use much more than the Americans. And this is a more traditional American type of sanitizer, which more closely resembles a dishwasher. But the difference is, again, that the sanitizers get up to 160 degrees, 160 to 180 degrees, and they sterilize. Here you're looking at commercial washer and dryers. There's no question the commercial washer and dryers last much longer and take the kind of abuse and just, constant cleaning and drying of blankets that a shelter goes through. But the equipment setup is much different. They're not like your normal residential washers and dryers. The washers require large sumps in the ground. The dryers require much more electrical load. So again, if you're installing these, you need to make sure that you've got the systems in place that can accept this type of appliance. Hand in hand with good plumbing systems, durable materials, and appropriate equipment is ventilation. 100% outside air for animal and medical rooms is what we use in all of our facilities, not unlike what you'd find in a hospital. By contrast, office buildings tend to recirculate as much as 70% of the air, which means the air you're breathing, it has only about 30% fresh air that comes into it. This is one of the reasons why the energy bill on an animal care facility or a medical building is higher than a typical office building or other type of building where you do not have at-risk animals or humans. We tend to exchange the air as much as 8 to 12 times an hour as compared to 6 air changes for an office building. You will hear some people talk about much higher air changes, anywhere from 12 to even as high as 18 to 20, which was common 10 to 15 years ago. Recent research by groups such as UC Davis's Sheltered Medicine Group have actually found that air changes, although important to a certain extent, do not have the kind of impact on things like upper respiratory disease as they were once found to be, and that there's really many other components that have a much higher impact, stress being one. And we've also found that it's not so much the amount of air that you're changing constantly through the space, but how the air is introduced and where it's exhausted. So for example, and I think I alluded to this in some of the earlier slides, we tend to introduce the air high and then exhaust it low. So we install what we call low-level exhausts with ceiling supplies. You need to be a little bit careful about this. Low-level exhaust is great because it allows the air to be exhausted below your nose, the human's nose. So if there are odors in there, it's kind of great to keep them down low, and it results in good air movement through the space. But if you're washing down those areas, you need to kind of balance the needs of washing with the needs of air handling. So again, as you saw in some of the slides, we tend to compromise a bit and move the low-level exhaust up above the washdown area, or the main washdown area, to kind of strike a balance, which is why I refer to it as proper placement of supply and exhaust grills. So here you see a typical kennel room. The kennels are actually to the right, but this is the door leading into the kennel. And on either end of this particular kennel room, we have the low-level exhaust, which is mounted above the chair rail. So this is that compromise that I mentioned, where we do keep it low with the supply air up in the ceiling, so you get good airflow. In fact, the supply air is on the other side of the room, so it actually comes across the dog kennels, and you kind of get a good flow across every one of the habitat areas themselves. But it's above the main washdown area, and this is that compromise that I alluded to earlier. Lighting issues. Obviously caregivers need to see what they are doing. However, lighting ultimately needs to work for the animal. And as I'm sure all of you know, animals tend to react more to natural daylight. So we believe that windows, skylights, solar tubes should be the primary light source for animal habitats. Artificial light, which you need to install, should be supplementary for cleaning and care and where animals are receiving medical attention. However, and I believe firmly in this, humans also tend to work much better and feel better with natural light. So here's a good example of what we often do in some of our shelters. We have natural light coming in through a window on the left, but we also have a skylight that is centered over all of the canine kennels on the upper right. And then supplementing that is artificial light so that late in the day and for cleaning, staff can actually turn the lights on and focus on what they need to be working on. In many of our public adoption areas, we will use translucent roof systems. This one is called cow wall. And that light, a lot of the ultraviolet light is cut out that comes in. It's a kind of a nice diffuse light. And much of that light finds its way into other rooms within the space. It's a similar example of a alternate cow wall type system at the San Diego campus for animal care. And this is actually a solar tube at our Edmonton facility. The slide's probably difficult to read because this takes place in a adoption area that has a black ceiling where the public walks around, but the entire public area during the day is served by natural light that comes through these solar tubes. And again, even in the staff work areas, wherever we can, we try to supplement the artificial lighting, which you obviously need to do the job you're trying to do, with natural light that comes through, in this case, through the clear story glass. And again, this is a grooming area, and although it's not a great slide, but you can see the type of skylight we tend to use. The skylights are linear and they're flared because we put up a fairly simple 2x2 or 4x4 skylight on the roof. It's very inexpensive, and then we kind of get the most for our buck by spreading out the drywall so that it actually radiates or spreads out that light throughout the room. Notwithstanding all the new equipment, durable materials, new plumbing, mechanical systems that go into a well-designed animal care facility, there's a whole slew of other subjective and qualitative issues that factor into an animal's health and well-being. Different types of animals enter a shelter facility for different reasons, but a common thread is that they all enter under stressful conditions. A key goal of any shelter facility, as opposed to possibly a veterinary clinic, is to create an ongoing environment that supports at-risk animals so that they can be adopted. Stress may be the single biggest factor affecting the health of shelter animals, and that certainly has been reinforced by much of the recent research that's being done by veterinary facilities across the country. Oftentimes I have to ask, do our habitats and environments really support these animals? They certainly hold them, and we certainly set them up to be cleanable, but are they really supporting those other psychological needs of the animals that are coming in? There's so much focus that goes on today on adoption habitats, but it's really the initial intake period that may be the most critical time frame for an animal entering a facility. Critical in the sense that if an animal is going to make it through adoption, are they going to get socialized soon enough so that they can be adopted? It's going to happen in those first 2 to 3, 4 days that they're in the facility. Smaller compartments and the ability to hide I have found to be as important as to an incoming shelter animal as sophisticated building systems and durable surfaces. Smaller compartments reduce noise, they reduce stress levels, and animals need to be challenged and presented with choices, not just placed in a large room or a large kennel. So for example, this room, kind of larger than most kennels. The finish is well conceived, epoxy rosin turning up the wall, glazed block, very cleanable. But at the end of the day, the dog is staring at you because he's really got nothing to do and probably could care less that he's got this big area to play with. He wants to interface with a human. Some of them want to hide. There's just other needs that these kennel habitats and room habitats don't satisfy. The least supportive of environments are certainly the old warehouse-style kennel. And we tend to come in often working with shelters that do not have the funds to build a new facility. And the question is always, what can we do here? And my answer is that, well, with limited funds, you can at least begin to break down the scale of these particular facilities into smaller compartments. You can introduce walls and components so that the animals aren't facing each other, staring each other down, intimidating one another. And so the drawing on the right is one that takes a traditional space like this and simply divides it up into a couple of different wards. This is an indoor-outdoor facility. Within the context of these smaller compartments, we will then often combine kennels to create a more supportive environment for the dogs themselves. And in many instances, we've introduced a hide panel, which you see in the drawing and the photo on the right-hand side, which folds up against the wall when it's not in use, but staff can actually open this up and allow the dog an opportunity to find a hiding place on the other side, which we have found to be something that really is important to many of the really frightened animals that come into a shelter facility. And obviously, some animals in a shelter facility are not as stressed as others. Suffice it to say, there are many issues to consider when developing an animal care facility, far too many to present in the course of a short lecture like this. However, hopefully I've left you with the following key thoughts. First, animal care is ultimately dependent upon humans, their programs, and their protocols. The building is not a panacea for all problems. Second, a well-designed shelter facility needs to support those efforts and be an appropriate tool. And by an appropriate tool, I mean it needs to work for the intended users. Third, animal health and well-being can only flourish when both physical and psychological needs are integrated. And of course, that goes for animals and humans alike. Thank you very much, and good luck to all of you.